Alrighty, so this is going to be part 3 of my FPS template devlog. Now, a lot has been done mostly in the third-person aspect as well as code organization. Now, to start, let's go ahead and view the firearms. So currently, well, let me rephrase that. Now we have the option for two different types. So we have one firearm that consists of just parts and one that is complete. So the one that complete, obviously you still have the socket section and everything like that. But as you can see, everything has been organized and cleaned up into their own respective categories. So sockets, obviously you have a muzzle socket, you have the default aim socket, which would be a position right above the rail if you didn't have any attachments, or if you, let's say, had a firearm that already had iron sights on it, like a handgun or just any mesh that you pulled from somewhere else. You could easily set that and you would have the ability to aim down the iron sights just by setting the socket. It has been simplified how you go through and actually add attachments. So I have went ahead and added functions inside the firearm class that you can simply call. So obviously you can see right here, we can add a sight, we can add a forward grip, and then we have the initial function for magazines. Now this is going to get moved over to C++ as well. This function is in C++, but the magazine classes is a variable in Blueprint, which I want to move over and make it a default thing in C++, just so it's already there. You don't have to create it yourself. So that's for the complete firearm. You still have every single option. So we have the option for the left-hand IK, which gets changed whether or not you have a forward grip on it, such as here, I'm spotting an angled grip. I also have the option for a vertical grip. And we can go down through. We have the remaining sockets for other parts, but this can be ignored. As you can see, it's labeled in parts. So complete firearm refers to the firearm that doesn't need extra parts. The in parts firearm refers to the one that requires extra parts. So that's kind of how the naming is kept up and separated. And then we have the global stuff that we need. So we now have fire modes. So you can choose between safe, semi, full auto, as well as burst. We have the fire rate that you can set, as well as the burst count. So you can do 3-round burst, 5-round burst, whatever you want. And it'll be handled for you automatically. You can cycle through these all the same. And then we have the default stats. So I went ahead and switched this over to work in kilograms because I was initially doing this in pounds. And as you can assume with Unreal Engine being metric, and I think the weight by default is using kilograms anyways, it just makes more sense. So currently the complete firearm, for example, weighs 3 kilograms, which is like, I don't know, 6.5 or 7 pounds. We have the default values for ergonomics and the horizontal and vertical recoil. And that's all contained inside of a struct to make replication a little bit easier and everything kind of cleaned up on the C++ side. And here we actually have a couple new options. Aiming, or the animations anyways, I've added a bunch of different section names that you can go ahead and set. So if you don't have some, you can just replace them or set none and all that kind of stuff. They don't all have to be used. But the shoulder stock offset. So we have the X, Y, and Z axis. And what that is that it doesn't affect yourself. But for example, as you can see, when I go to aim, it depends on where it puts the stock on the third person mesh. So as you can see, it's putting the buffer tube right about at his trap. So the stock, again, I don't have it modeled right now, would come down a little bit and sit kind of on the upper shoulder. And you can alter this position. So if you wanted to, you could bump it up. So let's say I wanted it to, I don't know, let's actually go down. So I want the stock to sit lower on his, kind of more towards the chest. Well, you can do that. As you can see, now it sits a lot lower and all that kind of stuff. So really you can just kind of control it through that. Did that get reset? Yes, it did. So that's the main thing that's kind of handled through there. I already went through animation. All of the functions are now stored based upon the class inside of FPS template. And again, they're all categorized. Now let's move on to the character. We now have a split mesh, as well as the option to do true first person. So as you can see, here's a checkbox here. Is true first person. If you're going to use this, make sure you check it, because if not, you're going to have some issues that really you don't want. But you also have the option for the camera socket, which is where you want the camera to be mounted to. Currently, I have a blueprint function that will be moved to C++ shortly if you're using a first-person setup, or sorry, not a true first-person setup. So basically, because the first person mesh is a child of the camera, obviously if you move the camera, you're going to move the first person mesh as well. So what this is doing, it's kind of getting the offset between the two and moving the mesh to that location. So that way, wherever you are going through and animating inside of something like Blender or Maya, you can move it, or you can have a one-to-one kind of transfer between your animation software and Unreal Engine. So that way they look identical. So that's what this is for. Again, this will be moved to C++ and handled for you automatically. You don't have to really worry about it. Next up, we have the bones to hide for the true first person mesh, which is just an array. So currently, in my case, I want to hide the neck and the head. Then we have our weapon grip socket. So that's where the firearm is going to get attached to, which I need to rename that to firearm to keep the naming similar. Then obviously we just have the default firearm class. This is just a placeholder so we can, test easy. So currently, I am using a separate mesh setup. So as you can see, I'm just arms. I have no body or anything like that. Well, if I want to change to a true first person setup, the only thing I got to do, check this little box here, and this little guy right here, the first person mesh, I believe I have it set to where to automatically hide. Yes, I do. And it'll take care of it for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So again, you have aiming, you have the weapon sway, which is kind of hard to see because of how light the gun is. And there's a little bit of jitter that I need to fix, but that's due to the spine rotation. So currently you can see I have no head and no neck, but everything kind of works appropriately. Again, the only issue I'm having here that I had to fix is that little bit of jitter, and I know exactly what's causing that. I just got to come up with a way to go about actually fixing it. That covers pretty much everything for the character. Again, it's pretty simplified. Inside of the event graph, I just bound a bunch of different things here. So you have firing, stop firing on left mouse button, aiming for right, cycling through sights, reloading, reloading while drop magazine reloading, different type, and then we have the cycling through the fire modes. And again, all of the functions, if you want to, for whatever reason, tinker with other stuff, you have them right in here that you can use. All right, now let's go look at the animation instance. So we have the one for the body and the arms. So again, these are identical. They're separated into layers just to kind of keep them clean. So if we wanted to go ahead and look at the one that handles the movement lag and turning lag, we can do so. But we also have options over here. So we have the aim interpolation speed, kind of like the default, the cycle sights interpolation speed, and the rotation lag interpolation speed and all that kind of stuff. So this will affect everything globally. So if I wanted to make it so let's say, interpolate aiming a lot slower. So here's how I do it currently. Sorry, to chamber around. That's about the speed. If I wanted to, I could bump this down to like 3. And that would slow everything in regards to aiming globally, no matter what the firearm settings are. So it kind of doesn't override it, but it scales it back. So then we have the right hand bone that we're going to end up using. Mine is hand_R, obviously. And then we have the aiming head rotation. So this is for your actual, your head. So for example, let's go over here. Actually, I don't have that set already because I have to set that to a default value. But back to the class defaults. Currently it's set to 45. If I play with 2 clients and we look at each other, as you can see, there's currently my head angle. If I wanted to bump that up, make it a little more, let's say not as aggressive, I'll just bump this down to 20. That'll take effect as well. So as you can see, the head doesn't lean nearly as much. And this can be, I may end up setting that up so it can be adjusted based upon your firearm. So you can have specific settings, just like you have with the stock placement. Okay, let's see. Let's go as far as the firearm for just all the parts. I don't know why that's still there. I don't need it. So what we're doing, you can ignore the chamber around. Actually, I don't know why that's still there because it should be overwritten, I think. I'll just leave them there for the time being. But anyways, we have again the same functionality for adding sights. So in this case, I had 2 sights. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and actually switch back to a first person setup like so. And I want to change the firearm to the parts firearm. Here we go. We have 2 different optics. And as you can see, that's how they're spawned and attached. So they're based upon, again, sockets. Then we go through and we have a barrel, handguard, and then obviously the initializer for the magazines. Now I have 2 different sections for barrels. I have a 10-inch and a 20-inch, which I wasn't really specific when I went through the size. And then for the handguard, I have a 10-inch and a 16-inch. So you can really customize how you want your firearm to be handled. So currently, I have what, in my opinion, would be a good recoil reducing setup. So I have a long, heavy handguard with a long, heavy barrel and a suppressor hanging off the end of it. So I have, let me go to, oh, and I just found a bug. So that'll be good for me to mark. So that would be in out of bounds. So that would be for the fire modes. Okay, so I think I have to set up a check and make sure I actually have fire modes before I access it. So that will be something to check. Alrighty, back into the engine. Let's go back to the weapon for the parts. And default fire modes, yep, that would be Y. So I want safe, semi, and full auto for mine. Again, we have the default 800 rounds per minute for the M4. So let me go to semi and full, and you can see it's pretty good at reducing recoil. There's really just not much to it. Now, let's say I wanted to switch this up a bit. I'll switch to the 10-inch the 10-inch barrel with the 10-inch handguard. And let's actually go look at those classes. So we go to the 10-inch handguard, and that switches to the angled grip, not the vertical grip. And if we go to the barrel, we are adding the normal muzzle brake instead. So this is not going to be as good a control for recoil, but it is going to handle it's going to be a lot higher in terms of ergonomics. So you're going to be able to aim a lot faster, as you can see like that. Switch between your sights a lot faster because the gun is light and we have a high ergonomic build. And there's barely any weapon sway. However, the recoil, again, is going to be a good bit worse because of that. So there's the trade-offs there. So again, we have the 10-inch barrel, which has a weight of 0.02 kilograms. These are not actually like properly set values, but we subtract just a little bit from the ergonomics and just a little bit from recoil. Now, if we go ahead and we view the 20-inch and we compare it, that weighs a good bit more. We reduce the ergonomics a good bit more, and we reduce the recoil a tiny bit more as well on top of that. Alrighty, and I noticed something else while I was going through this stuff. Currently, I'm in the wrong section. I have nothing set for the animation montages to play. So that's why we had no proper setups for kind of like the reload animations as it really didn't know what exactly to do. So I'm going to have to go through and set that up real quick. So I figured I'll go ahead and just show you while I'm at it. So I have the parts animation montage. Yeah. Let's see what the other one was using. I thought they were sharing the same one. Oh, well, yeah, they are. Durr. We just have a bunch of new names. So we have obviously chamber round. Bring this out a little bit so we can see. Chamber round, reload, reload empty, reload drop mags, and again, these are all customizable to your own montage. So you don't have to, follow it along exact. You can have your own different names and all that kind of stuff. You just have to make sure they correspond to whatever you're setting them as. So now I should have proper animations. I'm hoping. So let's try it out. Switch fire modes, which we were doing. So I should be in full auto. Right, there, as you can see, now the bolt's released. So I can go ahead and do a reload, and it'll hit the bolt release. So now the montages are set up and working based upon, obviously, the montage. So for each thing, let's go to the barrel, for example. We have a couple different options for each of these. So the barrel, we have the option to add muzzle devices. Again, we have the basic information and the socket that we want the projectile to fire from, assuming you don't have a muzzle device. So if you have a muzzle device, this gets ignored. It grabs the muzzle device and uses the muzzle device's socket, as you can see here. And again, the muzzle device has its own set of data there, and these all carry over to the actual firearm itself. So that goes for the handguards, obviously, which we have the forward grip socket. So that's where a grip, once you want to attach the grip to. We have the hand socket, which this gets ignored if we have a forward grip, and we have a sight socket. Now on top of that, we also have the ability to add sights to the handguard now. So let's see, I was using the 10-inch handguard, so let me go ahead and I'll just add a sight to it. Well, actually, let me check and make sure I have a socket first. If not, go ahead and add one real quick. I do not, so let's go ahead and add it. So I'm going to do s_sight 0, and let's just add the reflex sight. Whoa, that's super sensitive for visual representation of where to place it. So for me, I'll just go out towards the front a little bit, because why not? I don't really care too much about placement. 45 degrees, and move it down. All right, so now we have that at sight or socket 0. So what we can do is just add sight. And I want to add the reflex sight. That's the only one I have so far. And the socket is s_sight 0. I'm using a socket system, as you can see, and we now have it. And it automatically takes care of the aiming for you because it's already set and everything's getting added appropriately. So even though this is not a child of the firearm itself, it's a child of the handguard, everything gets linked together kind of in a chain. So that's how we can go through and add sights to our handguard. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to get rid of it, and obviously it goes away. So as you add more sights, obviously, you add more weight. So with that being kind of like a higher ergonomic build, I don't really want to do that. So next up, we have the option to play the chamber animation. So what I mean by that is when I hit play, of course it's not going to go through and do it. Do I have it set? Yeah. It just wasn't being played, so I think it was playing on the complete one only. Yep, there we go. So as you could see there, we are playing the chambering animation whenever we go through and launch, and it actually has to chamber around. So currently when we first spawn, we have nothing in the chamber, but we have a full magazine. So I don't remember if I mentioned it in the previous video, but we now have a chamber system. So when we first spawned, we're 30 rounds in the magazine. It did a check when the new, we have a magazine inserted. It checked and said, there's a full magazine, but I have no rounds in the chamber. So it went ahead and chambered around for us. That's why it played this animation right here. Then after that, we have 1 round in the chamber, but 29 rounds in the magazine. So if I go through and let me just do a good bit of that one, I'll go ahead and reload. Actually, I can better show you by simply reducing the count that these have. So I'll change each of these to just a 5-round magazine. So they're both set to 5 rounds. All right, now we have 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I shoot again, we have 5, so that's the entire magazine plus the chamber. If I do reload to a new magazine, which has 5 rounds in it, I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now we have 6 rounds. So that's just a demonstration on how the chamber system is set up. Try to make it a little bit more realistic when it comes down to ammo. So let's see. We have all of our animations set up. We have 2 test projectiles. I don't think there's anything else. We have obviously our assets. This can get removed because I'm not using that anymore. But we have all of our static meshes for the parts, all of the animations for the firearm, the fire mode switching. That is another thing that is getting controlled. I don't think I showed that. But if we look down here where my mouse is, I press F, we switch fire mode so we can go between semi, safe, and full auto without much of an issue. There's an option for burst in there, but I don't have an animation for that, and as well as that lower receiver is not set up for burst, so can't really do that. Now the other thing is our character assets. Wrong folder. So we have a base skeleton. So this third person mesh is rigged to the epic skeleton, and it's also set up, or sorry, let me rephrase that. The skeleton is used for the first and third person mesh. So they're pretty much doing the exact same thing. They're just playing slightly different animations. So here we have the third person body. I don't need that anymore. We have the arms, and we have all of our animations. So obviously we have it for the arms. So we have chambering around, idling, and all that kind of stuff. All the different poses we need. Because realistically, all you need for this system is a simple idle pose, which no animation required. It's just going to be literally holding the rifle like so. And as you can see, it's broken there. So I got to switch the preview mesh back to the arms. That's all you need for this system to essentially work. And then you just need a simple reload animation like so. And everything else for the most part is taken care of for you. So then we have a fairly complex animation montage. It's not really that complex when you look at it, but there's just a lot of events. So for example, in the reload, again, I got to change preview mesh. When we go through, we grab the magazine, pull it out, and here's where we grab a new magazine. We insert the magazine fully, so this is where you would trigger your events right here for adding things like updating the ammo in your widget, or like the ammo count in your UI or something like that, to let the player know, like, hey, you have completed a reload. Here's your new total amount of ammo or whatever you're doing. And then obviously we have the reload complete. Same thing for the reload empty. So again, we just simply, oh wait, sorry, wrong one. The drop magazine reload. So we drop the magazine, we have an event for that. Grab a new one, go through and all that fun stuff. And then we have the chambering round. So here's where we just start off, we change the chamber of the round. And if we zoom in where we have these fire selecting modes, we have the change fire mode, and the fire mode is actually changed. So we start, and then when we finish, we have fire mode changed. So we essentially have where we start changing the fire mode has been changed. At the very end. So these are all linked up in the animation blueprint, which I have set up kind of more so as an example. So if we look at the event graph, we have a new magazine. All we do is we check if the character that we have set is valid, the firearm's valid. We call the simple functions that correspond to the name. So we have grab new magazine, complete reload, drop magazine, inserted magazine, set the fire mode. So we can, this is kind of where we go through and we update it. So this is what triggers the actual firearms animation playing for changing the fire mode. And then we have the final for changing the fire mode, which simply sets it so when we go to aim and we change the fire mode, as you can see, it's rotating a little bit. That's what this function right here stops. So let me rephrase that, like it stops it whenever it's done. So that way it allows you to still aim properly. We have the fire mode change finish, which I don't really remember what that actually does. Oh yes, now I remember. So changing fire mode, that's when you start. So that's why it's at the very beginning for changing fire mode. So that makes it so this fires, sets it to is changing. So that allows you to have the rotation when you're changing the fire mode. And then once it's finished, we stop that. And then same thing, chambering around finished. And that's pretty much all there actually is. Everything else is handled for you. There's the only thing you have to do as an end user should hopefully be one, supply your own models. These will all come with it, obviously. But the only assets you really need would be a firearm mesh like this. So just I can actually delete. All you need is simply a base mesh. Then you can go through and you can add whatever sockets you want. So for example, I have this socket here that I added, and that is just for a spot to attach an optic, which you can go through and do. We have this S_aim socket right there, which is where you would be aiming if you did not have an optic. So if I wanted to, I could remove where I add the sights and get rid of all that. And I'm on the wrong firearm, go figure. Let's grab the complete firearm, and we will skip adding a sight. So that's for this. That way you know where to actually aim. You can still look down the rail. We have just another example sight to use, just an offset. We have our slot for a muzzle device, so if you wish to attach a muzzle device to it, you could still do so, assuming you didn't have something already in the way like this one does. Then you have your left-hand IK, your forward grip placement, and that's pretty much it. You know, obviously your magazine mode for animation, but that's really all. If you wanted to get into the fun stuff, you would go through and work on adding the actual firearm and parts, because this is the one that I still got to add things like a stock, obviously, but I've been working on this to make it so it kind of resembles Escape from Tarkov. So you have full customization over the firearm, all the parts, and everything. Everything you can control on the firearm, you can do. So that's why I'm kind of setting this up as it is. So it's just like a bunch of little things, like, for example, with the fire modes. For, an M16, you would have safe, semi, and full auto. On an AK, for example, assuming it's select fire, you have safe, then you would have full auto, and then you would have semi. So you would go through, and that's how the animations would get played. So we have safe, we go to full auto, semi. And I'm on the wrong one again, go figure. Put that back. As you can tell, it's late, it's nearly 4 in the morning. So we have safe, full auto, and then semi. So those would be the order that you would select your fire modes in. So we have safe, we go right to full auto, then the next one's going to be semi, then we go right back to safe, where we cannot shoot. Alrighty, I think that's pretty much everything. So all the hard stuff is kind of hidden away. It's just up to the end user to tinker with some settings. Obviously, I have like a little bug to fix that came up earlier that caused a crash. Yeah, if you have any other suggestions, please let me know. There's not a whole lot more that I really want to do. Like, for example, I don't want to implement the ability to change weapons inside of this. I want to leave that up to the customer who sets this up, because they could have a completely different system in mind than just a simple, primary, secondary system. They could have a system like Tarkov, system like Arma, whatever they have in mind. So keep in mind, if it's something that's probably going to want to be unique to a project, I don't plan on implementing it. But any other suggestions that you guys do have, please let me know, because I want to make this as well-rounded as possible. And obviously the animations currently suck, but at least you get a working project that you can build off of. So everything programmatically behind the scenes is handled for you, and handled for you pretty well, in my opinion. Everything's event based for performance reasons. There's not really anything that's going to be constantly hogging performance. And I plan on keeping it going with that route. So I will see you in the next devlog, which might be the release version. I'm not quite sure. We're getting very close though. So I'll see you in the next video.